The champagne glasses trembled as she took the microphone with shaking hands. But when the first note escaped her lips, the entire ballroom fell silent and tears streamed down the CEO's face. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now subscribe to the channel and let's get started. Amanda Collins stared at the pregnancy test in her trembling hands, her eyes widening as two pink lines appeared, unmistakable in the harsh fluorescent light of her tiny bathroom. She sat on the edge of the bathtub, her heart racing, a mixture of fear and wonder washing over her. "I'm pregnant," she whispered to herself, the words hanging in the air of the cramped bathroom where the shower curtain was patched with duct tape and the tiles had long ago lost their shine. 23-year-old Amanda had been fighting for her singing career for years, performing in dive bars across the Bronx, her powerful voice drawing modest crowds but barely enough tips to cover her bills. But now, in this unexpected moment, everything had changed. She placed a protective hand over her still flat stomach. "Hello in there," she whispered, a tentative smile forming on her lips. Later that afternoon, Amanda bustled around her small one-bedroom apartment, straightening throw pillows on the worn sofa and arranging fresh daisies, purchased with her last $5, in a chipped vase. She hummed one of her original songs as she prepared, rehearsing different ways to share the news with Trevor. "We're having a baby," she practiced, then shook her head. "Trevor, I'm pregnant," she tried again, watching her expression in the mirror, hoping to find the perfect words that would bring joy rather than panic to his face. Trevor Reynolds was everything Amanda wasn't, Harvard-educated from old money and rapidly climbing the corporate ladder at Reynolds Investments, his family's prestigious firm. Their unlikely romance had begun a year ago when he wandered into the bar where she was performing, attracted by her soulful rendition of "At Last." Despite their different worlds, their chemistry had been undeniable. The sound of keys in the door made Amanda's heart leap. She smoothed her simple dress and took a deep breath. Trevor entered, his tailored suit slightly rumpled after a long day, his expression weary. He loosened his Italian silk tie and dropped his leather briefcase by the door without looking at her. "What a day," he sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "The Jacobson merger is a nightmare. My father's breathing down my neck about quarterly projections, and the subway was a disaster." He finally looked up at her, noticing the set table. "What's all this?" "I made dinner," Amanda said, gesturing toward the modest pasta dish she'd prepared. "I thought we could have a nice meal together. It's been a while." Trevor checked his watch, a graduation gift from his father worth more than Amanda's entire wardrobe. "I can't stay long. I have reports to review before tomorrow's board meeting." "It'll just take a few minutes," she said, her voice betraying a hint of nervousness. "I have something important to tell you." They sat at her small kitchen table, Amanda watching anxiously as Trevor took a few distracted bites, his mind clearly still at the office. "This is nice," he said without enthusiasm, his phone buzzing repeatedly beside his plate. Amanda took a deep breath, reaching for his hand across the table. "Trevor, I found out something today." Her voice trembled slightly. "I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air between them. Trevor's fork froze halfway to his mouth. He set it down with deliberate slowness, his expression transforming from distraction to something colder, more calculating. The silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. "Pregnant," he finally repeated, the word flat and emotionless. Amanda nodded, a tentative smile forming. "I know it's unexpected, but do you have any idea what this means for my career?" Trevor interrupted, his voice frighteningly calm. He pushed his plate away, appetite gone. "I'm about to be named Director of Mergers and Acquisitions, the youngest in the firm's history." "I thought you might be happy," Amanda said, her smile faltering. "We can make it work together." Trevor stood up, pacing the small living room, looking around the apartment with new eyes that seemed to catalog every flaw, every sign of Amanda's modest means. A pregnant bar singer? That's not exactly what I had in mind for this stage of my life. Bar singer? Amanda echoed, hurt blooming in her chest. He'd never referred to her career so dismissively before. Let's be realistic, Amanda. Trevor gestured around the apartment. I have client meetings, social functions, a reputation to build. Did you really think I could show up with someone who sings covers in dive bars? Someone who can barely make rent? Amanda stood up, her hands instinctively moving to her stomach. I love you, Trevor. I thought we were building something together. Building what exactly? His laugh was cold, unfamiliar. This was fun, Amanda, a diversion. But I have plans, real plans that don't include an unplanned pregnancy with someone from… He waved his hand vaguely. This background. The casual cruelty of his gesture cut deeper than his words. Amanda felt as though the floor was tilting beneath her feet. I want this baby, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Our baby. Trevor's expression hardened further, any trace of the man she thought she knew vanishing completely. You're not enough, Amanda. You never were. The words came out with practiced precision as if he'd been rehearsing them. I need someone who understands my world, who enhances my image. You're too ordinary. Your voice? Mediocre at best. Your talent? Insignificant. He straightened his tie. To be honest, I was planning to end things anyway. Each word struck like a physical blow. Amanda struggled to breathe as the man she loved systematically dismantled her worth. Trevor walked to the kitchen, his movements methodical. He pulled out his Italian leather wallet and extracted several $100 bills, tossing them carelessly onto the table. This should cover a solution. His voice was businesslike now. Or use it for next month's rent, whatever. But don't contact me again. Amanda stared at the money, nausea rising in her throat. How can you abandon your own child? Trevor paused at the door, his hand on the knob. When he turned back, his expression was detached, clinical. People like you are born to serve people like me, not to stand beside me. Accept that and move on. The door closed behind him with quiet finality, leaving Amanda alone in the suddenly cold apartment. She stood frozen for several long moments before her legs gave way and she sank to the kitchen floor, curling around her abdomen as if to protect the life growing inside from the cruelty of its father's rejection. $700 lay on the table. The rent was due in 2 weeks. The utilities were already past due. The tears came then, hot and unstoppable, soaking the sleeve of her dress as she sobbed on the kitchen floor. Everything had changed in an instant. The future she had imagined shattered into unrecognizable pieces. The next few months were a descent into a nightmare Amanda had never imagined possible. 2 weeks after Trevor walked out, the manager at her regular singing gig called her aside. Look, Amanda, you're talented, but… His eyes dropped to her midsection, where the slightest curve was beginning to show. A pregnant singer changes the vibe, attracts the wrong kind of attention. Please, Amanda begged, desperation creeping into her voice. I need this job. I can wear looser clothes. No one will notice. But his mind was made up. She left with her final paycheck, barely enough to cover a week's rent. The unemployment office was crowded with exhausted single mothers and laid-off workers, all avoiding eye contact, all clutching paperwork that might lead to temporary salvation. Amanda took her place among them, one hand protectively over her growing belly. The interview for a waitressing position came next. How far along are you? The manager asked, eyeing her with suspicion. 4 months, Amanda admitted. Well, you can start tomorrow, but you'll need to hide it from the customers. Wear the apron tight. And so began her new routine. 8 hours on her feet serving tables, fake smiles for better tips, her ankles swelling in cheap shoes. Tips were meager, barely enough to survive. But it wasn't enough. A second job came as a receptionist at a small recording studio. You can answer phones from 9 to 3, the owner said. But if you start showing too much, you'll have to go. Image matters in this business. At night, when she could get gigs, Amanda still sang at bars for tips. Her voice tired but still beautiful, a hat with a few bills and coins her reward. Back in her apartment, which now had a 5% rent increase, Amanda would count her money at the kitchen table. Rent, utilities, food, prenatal vitamins. Something always had to give. At the public prenatal clinic, Amanda waited for hours to see an overworked doctor who spent 5 minutes with her, concerned about her blood pressure but too busy to do much more than prescribe rest, an impossible luxury. Rejection after rejection followed her attempts to continue her music career. "You've got talent, honey, but come back after the baby," one club owner told her, not unkindly. One night, after being turned down for yet another singing opportunity because nobody wants a pregnant woman on stage, Amanda collapsed onto a subway seat, silent tears streaming down her face. Her hand never left her growing belly, the connection to her child the only warmth in a world that had turned cold. An elderly woman sat beside her, offering a clean handkerchief. "I couldn't help noticing," she said gently. "My daughter started out alone too. Today she owns her own company." The woman patted Amanda's hand. "Transform this pain into purpose, dear." That night, looking at the New York skyline through her cracked window, stars barely visible through the city lights, Amanda made a promise to the baby growing inside her. "He said we're not enough," she whispered, placing both hands on her rounded belly. "We're going to show him, and the world, just how wrong he was." In May of 2009, Ethan Collins was born, his cries filling the delivery room with new life and possibilities. In the hospital, Amanda filled out the birth certificate, leaving the father field blank. With her son in her arms, she began formulating a plan for her own reinvention, determined to transform each of Trevor's cruel words into fuel for her success. On that night of abandonment, Amanda couldn't have imagined that 15 years later, she would be landing her private helicopter atop the skyscraper that bore her name while Trevor watched her ascent with bitter regret. Amanda clutched her son tightly in her arms as she left the hospital, the May sunshine feeling like a cruel joke against the reality of her situation. The nurse had wheeled her to the entrance, standard procedure, but now she stood alone on the sidewalk, a car seat containing her newborn in one hand, a small bag of belongings in the other. No proud father taking photos, no family waiting with balloons, just Amanda and Ethan against the world. "We're going home," she whispered to her sleeping son, though the word home felt hollow. The apartment she could barely afford awaited them, rent already 2 weeks overdue. The following morning brought the cruel reality of motherhood without support. Amanda awoke to Ethan's cries, her body aching from childbirth, her mind foggy from lack of sleep. She changed his diaper with trembling hands, then fed him while staring at the stack of bills on her kitchen counter. The owner of her building, a man with perpetually suspicious eyes, knocked on her door that afternoon. "Rent's late again, Collins," he said, his gaze drifting to the baby in her arms. "And now you've got a kid? That's extra noise, extra water." "I just need until Friday," Amanda pleaded. "I'm going back to work next week," he snorted. "Yeah, well, starting next month, rent's going up 15%. Building improvements." He gestured vaguely at the hallway where nothing had been improved in years. When he left, Amanda sank to the floor, Ethan cradled against her chest, and allowed herself exactly 2 minutes of tears before wiping her eyes. "No time for this," she murmured, kissing her son's forehead. "We've got plans to make." The manager at the diner where she'd been waitressing looked at her with a mixture of pity and annoyance when she showed up asking about returning to work. "Look, Amanda, we filled your position. Can't hold jobs for people having babies." His eyes softened slightly. "Come back in a few weeks if you're desperate. Maybe we'll have something then." The recording studio was only marginally more accommodating. "You can start back Monday," the owner said, not looking up from his mixing board. "Same pay, but you'll need to handle more duties. Lost a receptionist and an assistant last month." "What about the baby?" Amanda asked. He glanced at Ethan, sleeping in his second-hand carrier. "As long as he doesn't cry during sessions and you handle all your work, I don't care if you bring him." And so began Amanda's new life, answering phones at the studio during the day with Ethan sleeping beneath her desk, waitressing evenings when she could find someone to watch him for a few hours, and on rare nights when she could secure a singing gig, performing with her infant in a carrier backstage, praying he wouldn't wake until her set was finished. The exhaustion was bone deep. Amanda would drag herself home after midnight, feed Ethan in the darkness of their apartment, then collapse for a few hours before his cries started the cycle again. There was never enough. Not enough sleep, not enough money, not enough time. One particularly brutal evening, Amanda stood in a pharmacy, staring at the baby formula she couldn't afford. Her breasts had stopped producing enough milk, her body too undernourished to sustain both herself and her child. $23, she whispered, looking at the price tag. She had $27 to last until payday, and the electric bill was already past due. "First baby?" asked an older woman beside her. Amanda nodded, embarrassed at the tears threatening to spill. "My daughter used this brand," the woman said, reaching for a different container. "It's $18 and just as good." She smiled kindly at Ethan, who was fussing in his carrier. "He's beautiful." That small act of kindness nearly broke Amanda. She thanked the woman with a voice thick with emotion, paid for the formula, and walked home through streets that seemed increasingly hostile to her dreams. At the studio, Amanda began noticing patterns in the music industry that others seemed to overlook. Artists would come in, record demos, then struggle to get their music heard. The big labels controlled distribution, and independent musicians were left fighting for scraps. "It's highway robbery," complained one musician after a session. "They want 70% of everything I make, and I still have to handle my own promotion." Amanda listened while filing paperwork, Ethan sleeping in his makeshift bed under her desk. The conversation planted a seed in her mind. During her lunch breaks, she began using the studio's computer to research the music industry's digital transformation. Platforms were emerging that allowed independent artists to distribute their music, but they were clunky, expensive, or difficult to navigate. "There has to be a better way," she murmured, jotting notes in a cheap notebook while eating a peanut butter sandwich, lunch and dinner combined to save money. One night, after a particularly discouraging audition where the manager had told her, "Nobody wants a tired mom on stage," Amanda collapsed on the subway, the weight of rejection crushing her chest. Ethan was fussy, overtired from being dragged across the city. Fellow passengers glared at the noise, some moving seats to escape the crying baby. An elderly woman with kind eyes sat down beside Amanda, offering a clean handkerchief. "He's just telling the world he exists," she said, nodding toward Ethan. Amanda wiped her tears, embarrassed. "I'm sorry about the noise." "Never apologize for taking up space," the woman replied firmly. "My daughter was a single mother too, started with nothing but determination. Today she owns her own company in Chicago." She patted Amanda's hand. "Transform this pain into purpose, dear." "How?" Amanda asked, the simple question containing all her desperation. "By refusing to let their limitations become yours," the woman said before standing to exit at the next stop. "The world will tell you what you can't do. Your job is to show them what you can." That night, Amanda stood at her cracked window, looking out at the New York skyline glittering against the darkness. Ethan was finally asleep in his second-hand crib, his tiny chest rising and falling with perfect breaths. "He said we're not enough," she whispered to her son and to the indifferent city beyond. "We're going to show him, and everyone else, just how wrong he was." The next morning, Amanda woke with a clarity she hadn't felt since before Ethan's birth. She fed and changed him, then sat at her tiny kitchen table with her notebook. While Ethan played with a rattle on a blanket beside her, she began mapping out a plan. If no one would give her opportunities, she would create her own. If the music industry wouldn't make space for her, she would carve out her own place within it. Trevor's cruel words, "People like you are born to serve people like me," echoed in her mind, fueling a determination that burned hotter than her humiliation. Amanda enrolled in night classes at the community college, business administration and digital marketing. The courses were online, which meant she could study after Ethan was asleep, often working until 3 in the morning before collapsing for a few hours. She found a teenage neighbor willing to watch Ethan for $5 an hour during her evening shifts at the diner. The arrangement stretched her finances to breaking point, but the education felt like investing in their future. Supply and demand, her economics professor explained in one online lecture. Find a need that isn't being met, and you've found your business. Amanda thought about the frustrated musicians at the studio, talented artists with no path to audience or income. Their need was her opportunity. The public library offered free internet access and 1 hour per day on their computers. Amanda used every minute, researching digital distribution platforms, artist royalties, and emerging streaming technologies. She took notes in her increasingly dog-eared notebook, drawing diagrams and business models while Ethan napped in his stroller beside her. "Ma'am, your time is up," the librarian would say each day, and Amanda would gather her notes and her baby, heading to her next job or class. Winter came, bringing freezing temperatures to their poorly insulated apartment. Amanda wrapped Ethan in layers of donated clothes and tucked him into bed with her at night, their shared body heat the only reliable warmth. Christmas passed with little acknowledgement. A small stuffed bear for Ethan from a toy drive was their only celebration. Amanda couldn't afford heat and food. Presents were an impossible luxury. But in January, a breakthrough came. The studio owner, impressed with Amanda's efficiency despite her circumstances, offered her additional hours managing their social media accounts. "You seem to understand this internet stuff better than I do," he admitted. "An extra 100 a week if you can increase our bookings." The opportunity was precisely what Amanda needed: access to a computer, insight into the industry, and a small but crucial increase in income. She threw herself into learning everything about digital marketing, staying late after her shift ended, Ethan sleeping in his carrier beside her. The studio's bookings increased 30% in the first month under her management. She created targeted ads, built an email list, and established relationships with local venues and artists. "How'd you do it?" the owner asked, genuinely impressed. "I listened to what musicians actually need," Amanda explained, then showed how we could provide it. By spring, Amanda had saved enough to purchase a used laptop, a lifeline that allowed her to work and study from home during Ethan's naps and after his bedtime. She installed free web design software and began building a simple blog focused on independent musicians in New York. The blog started as little more than a hobby: interviews with artists who came through the studio, reviews of independent releases, tips for musicians trying to build careers outside the traditional system. But it quickly gained followers, particularly among frustrated artists seeking alternatives to predatory label contracts. "You've really tapped into something," one musician told her after reading her latest post about digital royalties. "Nobody's explaining this stuff in terms artists actually understand." Ethan's first birthday arrived in May, a milestone that felt miraculous given the odds they'd faced. Amanda splurged on a small cake and took photos with her phone's camera, the images slightly blurry but capturing his toothy smile and curious eyes. That night, after Ethan was asleep, Amanda scrolled through the photos, pausing on one where he looked startlingly like Trevor. The same determined set to his jaw, the same intelligent eyes. For a moment, grief washed over her for all that Trevor had chosen to miss, for the relationship Ethan would never have with his father. But the grief transformed quickly into renewed purpose. Trevor had deemed them insufficient, unworthy of his time or support. Every milestone Ethan reached, every small success Amanda achieved, was proof of how profoundly wrong he had been. She opened her laptop and began working on her blog, adding a new feature she'd been considering: a forum where independent artists could connect directly with each other, sharing resources and opportunities outside the traditional gatekeepers. The idea was simple but powerful. If the system wouldn't make space for them, they would build their own system. That night in her tiny apartment, exhausted but driven, Amanda couldn't have known that the simple blog created on a second-hand laptop would eventually become the foundation of an empire worth billions, transforming forever the industry that had once rejected her. The contractions started at 3 in the morning. Amanda had been dreaming of singing on a vast stage when the sharp pain jolted her awake. She lay in her narrow bed, hands pressed against her swollen belly, breathing through the contraction as she'd learned in the free prenatal class at the community center. "Not yet," she whispered to her unborn child. "We need to wait until morning so we can catch the bus." But her body, and her baby, had other plans. By 5:30, the contractions were coming every 7 minutes. Amanda called her neighbor, Mrs. Petrovich, an elderly woman who had promised to watch her apartment while she was in the hospital. "It's time," Amanda said when the woman answered, voice groggy with sleep. Within an hour, Amanda was in a taxi she couldn't afford, clutching a small duffel bag containing everything she'd need for her hospital stay. The driver kept glancing nervously in the rearview mirror. "Please don't have that baby in my cab," he said, accelerating through a yellow light. The hospital intake was a blur of forms and questions. "Father's name?" the clerk asked without looking up from her computer. Amanda hesitated only briefly. "There is no father." The delivery room was sterile and impersonal, but Nurse Garcia's hand was warm when she grasped Amanda's. "You're doing this alone?" she asked, her eyes kind but not pitying. Amanda nodded, gritting her teeth through another contraction. "Then I'm not leaving your side," Nurse Garcia promised, and she didn't. Through 12 hours of labor, Amanda's mind drifted between the pain of the present and flashes of memory. Trevor's cruel dismissal, months of exhaustion and hunger, the cold calculation in his eyes as he tossed money on her table like she was nothing more than a service rendered. When the pain reached its crescendo, she channeled it into determination. Each push was a rejection of Trevor's assessment of her worth. Each breath was a promise to the child fighting to enter the world. "One more big push," the doctor urged, and Amanda gathered her remaining strength. With a final, primal effort, her son entered the world, his angry cry filling the delivery room like the opening note of a symphony. They placed him on her chest, tiny and red-faced, his fists clenched as if ready to fight alongside her. "Ethan," she whispered, the name she'd chosen months ago. "Ethan Collins. Not Reynolds. Never Reynolds." An hour later, the same clerk who had processed her admission brought forms to her recovery room. "Birth certificate," she explained, handing Amanda a clipboard. Amanda's hand moved steadily across the page, completing each field with careful deliberation. When she reached father's name, she left it blank without hesitation. This child was hers alone, her responsibility, her joy, her future. The next morning, standing at the hospital entrance with Ethan secure in his carrier, Amanda felt a curious mix of terror and exhilaration. The world seemed simultaneously more threatening and more full of possibility than it had before. "We're going home," she told her son, though home was just a rundown apartment with past-due notices on the door. The first weeks were a fog of sleeplessness and adjustment. Amanda learned to function with a level of exhaustion she hadn't known was possible. She fed Ethan, changed him, sang to him during endless nights when colic kept him crying for hours. The small savings she'd managed to accumulate during her pregnancy dwindled rapidly. Formula, diapers, the higher rent, each expense was a stone pulling her deeper underwater. 2 weeks after bringing Ethan home, Amanda called the studio where she'd been working as a receptionist. "I can come back next Monday," she told the owner, trying to keep the desperation from her voice. There was a pause. "With the baby?" "I don't have childcare yet," Amanda admitted, "but he's quiet most of the time. I can keep him under the desk." Another pause, longer this time. Fine. But if it becomes a problem... It won't, Amanda promised quickly. Thank you. On Monday morning, Amanda arrived at the studio 30 minutes early, Ethan sleeping in a second-hand baby carrier strapped to her chest. She'd carefully packed a bag with everything he might need: diapers, formula, extra clothes, a small blanket to make a nest under her desk. The owner raised his eyebrows when he saw her, but said nothing. Amanda settled at the reception desk, arranging Ethan's blanket beneath it. When he woke, she fed him discreetly, answering calls with the phone cradled between her ear and shoulder. That first day established the pattern for the months that followed. Amanda became expert at multitasking, scheduling studio time while changing diapers, discussing rates with clients while gently bouncing Ethan, typing invoices with one hand while feeding him with the other. Most clients were understanding, some even charmed by the baby's presence. A few complained, but the owner, impressed by Amanda's efficiency despite her circumstances, generally took her side. "She does the work of two people," she overheard him telling a disgruntled producer. "The kid stays." At night, in their small apartment, Amanda would place Ethan in the center of her bed, surrounding him with pillows to keep him from rolling off. She'd sit beside him with her notebook, planning and dreaming in the dim light of a bedside lamp. "We're going to make it," she promised him. "One day at a time." The worst moments came at 3 or 4 in the morning, when exhaustion stripped away her defenses. In those dark hours, Trevor's words would return to haunt her. "People like you are born to serve people like me." The memory of his dismissive glance around her apartment, the casual cruelty with which he had assessed her worth and found it lacking. But with the sunrise came renewed determination. Each morning, looking at Ethan's face, so like Trevor's in features yet so different in spirit, Amanda recommitted to proving him wrong. When Ethan was 6 months old, Amanda was called into the studio owner's office. Her heart raced, certain she was about to be fired. Instead, he offered her additional responsibilities managing the studio's social media and website. "You understand this digital stuff better than I do," he admitted. "And I've noticed how you talk to the indie artists, how you understand their frustrations with the industry. I think you could help us attract more independent clients." The modest raise that came with these new duties allowed Amanda to start a small savings account. $10 a week at first, then 20. A cushion against disaster, the beginning of a future. By the time Ethan turned 1, he was showing signs of extraordinary intelligence. He spoke in complete sentences months before expected, showed remarkable memory, and seemed to absorb information at an astonishing rate. "He's advanced," the pediatrician at the community clinic confirmed during a checkup. "You should start looking into preschool programs for gifted children." Amanda nodded as if this were a reasonable suggestion, not mentioning that specialized education was a luxury far beyond her means. Instead, she checked out child development books from the library and created learning activities from whatever materials she could afford: flashcards made from cereal boxes, counting games with buttons, alphabet songs she composed herself. When Ethan was 18 months old, Amanda was scheduled for a routine wellness exam at a women's clinic. She almost canceled. Time away from work meant lost income they couldn't afford, but something made her keep the appointment. The doctor's face was serious as she reviewed Amanda's blood work. "Your iron levels are critically low," she explained. "You're severely anemic, and your blood pressure is concerning. When was the last time you ate a proper meal?" Amanda couldn't remember. She'd been stretching every dollar to provide for Ethan, often subsisting on his leftover cereal and whatever was on discount at the grocery store. "You can't take care of him if you don't take care of yourself," the doctor said gently, prescribing iron supplements and referring her to a nutrition program for low-income mothers. That night, Amanda looked at herself in the bathroom mirror for the first time in months. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Her cheekbones were too prominent, her once vibrant hair dull. She barely recognized the woman staring back at her. "Get it together, Collins," she told her reflection. "Ethan needs you strong." The nutrition program provided a small but crucial safety net. Weekly boxes of healthy staples, beans, rice, vegetables, fruit, allowed Amanda to begin rebuilding her strength. As her physical health improved, so did her mental clarity and determination. When Ethan was 2, Amanda was offered a full-time position managing the studio's operations and digital presence. The salary wasn't large, but it was stable, and it came with flexibility that allowed her to continue bringing Ethan to work. With this newfound security, Amanda enrolled in online business courses through the community college. She studied at night after Ethan was asleep, often working until the early hours of the morning before catching a few hours of rest. Every lesson she learned about marketing, digital platforms, business models, she applied to her growing understanding of the music industry's shortcomings. Through conversations with frustrated independent artists at the studio, she began to see a pattern. Talented musicians were creating exceptional work, but had no effective way to distribute it or monetize their creativity. The major labels still controlled access to audiences, and their contracts were increasingly exploitative. Digital platforms existed but were difficult to navigate and took excessive percentages of artists' already meager earnings. "There has to be a better way," Amanda said one evening to a singer who had just been offered a terrible contract by a major label. "If you find it, let me know," the singer replied with a bitter laugh. That night, unable to sleep despite her exhaustion, Amanda opened her laptop and began researching digital distribution models. She explored existing platforms, identifying their weaknesses and inefficiencies. She drafted outlines for a more artist-friendly approach, one that would harness the power of emerging social media and streaming services. Ethan slept peacefully in his toddler bed across the room, unaware that his mother was sketching the foundations of what would eventually become an empire. On Ethan's 3rd birthday, Amanda splurged on a small cake and a set of wooden blocks. She recorded a video of him on her phone as he blew out the candles, his face serious with concentration. "Make a wish, sweetheart," she encouraged. "I wish for a dog," he announced with the directness of a child who didn't yet understand the concept of keeping wishes secret. Amanda laughed, though the request pierced her heart. Their apartment didn't allow pets, and even if it did, they couldn't afford one. Another normal childhood experience she couldn't provide. That night, after the modest celebration, Amanda sat beside Ethan's bed as he fell asleep, his new blocks clutched in his small hands. Looking at his peaceful face, she made a decision. She would stop thinking small, stop accepting the limitations of her circumstances. She would build something not just for survival, but for success. True success that would ensure Ethan never had to wish for things that remained out of reach. The next morning, Amanda registered a domain name for a blog focused on independent music. It was a small step, almost insignificant, but it felt like a declaration of intent. The blog would be a testing ground for her ideas, a way to build credibility and connections within the industry. She named it Indie Voice, a nod to both the independent artists she hoped to serve and her own journey from silenced singer to emerging entrepreneur. That night in her tiny apartment, exhausted but driven, Amanda couldn't have known that the simple blog created on a second-hand laptop would eventually become the foundation of an empire worth billions, transforming forever the industry that had once rejected her. The glow of her laptop screen illuminated Amanda's face in the dim light of her apartment as she published her first blog post on Indie Voice. The clock on her nightstand showed 3:15 in the morning, but excitement overrode her exhaustion. She clicked publish and released her thoughts into the digital world. Why independent artists need a new distribution model. "Done," she whispered, careful not to wake Ethan, who slept peacefully in his toddler bed across the room. She closed the laptop and allowed herself a moment of quiet celebration before collapsing into a few precious hours of sleep. The next morning at the studio, Amanda answered phones with practiced efficiency while keeping one eye on her phone, checking for notifications. By lunchtime, her post had received 3 comments, all from independent musicians expressing frustration with the current system. It wasn't much, but it was a start. "What's got you smiling?" asked Marcus, a sound engineer who had always been kind to both her and Ethan. "I started a blog about independent music distribution," Amanda replied, bouncing 3-year-old Ethan on her knee as she ate a hasty sandwich. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Ambitious. The industry's pretty locked up by the major labels." "That's exactly the problem," Amanda said, her eyes lighting up. "Artists create the product, but middlemen control access to the audience and take most of the profit. It doesn't have to be that way anymore, not with digital platforms." Ethan, bored with adult conversation, slid off her lap to play with the wooden blocks she kept in her desk drawer. Amanda watched him arrange them meticulously by color, his small face serious with concentration. His intelligence both thrilled and terrified her. How would she ever provide the education he deserved? Over the next months, Amanda established a rhythm: studio work during the day, time with Ethan in the evenings, and blog writing late into the night. The Indie Voice audience grew steadily as she published practical advice for musicians navigating the changing digital landscape. "Your latest post about streaming royalties was spot on," commented a guitarist whose band recorded regularly at the studio. "No one else is explaining this stuff in plain English." Amanda's understanding of the industry deepened through daily conversations with artists at the studio. She listened to their frustrations, researched solutions, and gradually refined her vision of a better system. 6 months after launching the blog, Amanda sat in a coffee shop near the studio during her lunch break, Ethan quietly coloring beside her. She had arranged to meet with Diane Levine, a small angel investor who had reached out after reading Indie Voice. "I love what you're doing with the blog," Diane said after introductions. "You've identified a real pain point in the industry. What's your long-term vision?" Amanda had rehearsed this moment for weeks. A platform that allows independent artists to distribute directly to streaming services and retailers without exploitative contracts. One that provides data analytics so they can understand their audience and payment processing that gets them their money faster. Diane nodded, impressed. "And your business background?" "I've been managing operations and digital marketing for Riverside Studio for 3 years," Amanda replied. "And I'm completing my business administration degree online." Diane's eyes drifted to Ethan, who was methodically coloring within the lines of his book. "Single mother?" she asked without judgment. Amanda nodded, feeling the familiar tightness in her chest. Would this be the moment her dream derailed? Would her status as a single mother undermine her credibility as a founder? "It must be challenging," Diane observed. "It is," Amanda acknowledged, "but it's also my motivation. I'm building something not just for myself, but for him." Diane considered this, then glanced at Amanda's proposal. "Your idea has potential, but you're a mother with no tech background trying to build a tech platform. That's high risk from an investment standpoint." The word stung, but Amanda had anticipated the objection. "I understand the concern. That's why I've already connected with 2 developers who are willing to work evenings and weekends in exchange for equity. They believe in the vision." Diane looked impressed but remained hesitant. "Let me think about it. I'll be in touch within the week." As Amanda walked back to the studio, holding Ethan's hand, disappointment settled in her stomach. She had hoped for more enthusiasm, a commitment on the spot. The rejection, however polite, echoed Trevor's dismissal. Once again, she wasn't enough. That evening, after putting Ethan to bed, Amanda opened her laptop with renewed determination. If investors wouldn't back her, she'd find another way. She began researching how to build a basic version of her platform without significant funding, a minimum viable product that could prove her concept. YouTube tutorials and free coding courses became her nightly companions. Amanda had never considered herself technically inclined, but necessity proved a powerful teacher. Line by line, she learned enough HTML, CSS, and basic JavaScript to rebuild the Indie Voice site with more functionality. 3 weeks after her meeting with Diane, Amanda received an email that made her heart sink. After careful consideration, I've decided this investment isn't the right fit for my portfolio at this time. I wish you the best of luck." Amanda allowed herself 10 minutes to feel the disappointment, then returned to her code. Rejection was becoming a familiar companion, but so was resilience. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. A singer-songwriter who regularly recorded at the studio mentioned a problem during a session. "The distribution service I'm using takes 40% and doesn't even get my music onto all the major platforms." Amanda spoke up from her reception desk. "What if there was a service that took only 15% and distributed to every major platform?" The musician laughed. "I'd sign up yesterday." That night, Amanda had her eureka moment. The idea had been forming gradually, but now it crystallized with perfect clarity. Independent artists needed not just visibility but efficient, affordable distribution. The major platforms were open to content. The problem was getting through the gatekeepers. She sketched her solution on a whiteboard she'd installed in the apartment. A streamlined digital distribution service that would connect independent artists directly to all major streaming platforms and digital retailers. Artists would maintain ownership of their music while gaining access to audiences previously controlled by major labels. For weeks, Amanda refined her concept between work shifts and after Ethan's bedtime. She built a rudimentary prototype website and created detailed flowcharts of how the system would work. Every spare dollar went toward resources to improve her technical skills. Then came a moment that changed everything. As Amanda was closing the studio one evening, a successful indie producer who had just finished a session paused at her desk. "I've been reading your blog," he said. "You really understand the problems we're facing. Have you thought about actually building that distribution platform you described in your last post?" Amanda hesitated only briefly before pulling out her notebook. "Actually, I've been developing the concept. Would you like to see it?" For the next hour, she explained her vision while Ethan played quietly nearby. The producer asked sharp questions, challenging assumptions and offering insights from his years in the industry. "This could work," he said finally. "It's exactly what the independent scene needs right now. Do you have investors?" Amanda shook her head. "Not yet. I've had a few meetings, but no commitments." The producer considered this. "I know some people who might be interested. Let me make some calls." 2 weeks later, Amanda found herself in a small conference room at a downtown law firm, presenting her concept to 3 potential investors. Her hands trembled slightly as she distributed her business plan, but her voice remained steady as she outlined her vision for what she now called Indie Sound. "The prototype website is already functioning," she explained, pulling up the site she'd built. "Artists can create profiles, upload music, and see analytics on a basic dashboard. What we need now is the back-end infrastructure to connect with distribution channels and payment processing." One investor, a former music executive, leaned forward. "What makes you think you can succeed where others have failed? This isn't exactly a new idea." "Existing platforms were built by tech people trying to solve a music problem," Amanda replied. "Indie Sound is being built by a music industry insider solving a problem I see every day. The difference is in the details: streamlined contracts, transparent analytics, faster payment processing, and a significantly lower commission rate." The questions continued for nearly 2 hours. Amanda answered each one with the confidence of someone who had thoroughly researched her market and competition. When Ethan grew restless in the corner where he had been quietly playing, she seamlessly incorporated him into the presentation. "This is why Indie Sound will succeed," she said, bringing him to stand beside her. "Because it's not just a business idea, it's a mission to create a more equitable industry for the next generation of creators." As they were leaving, the former music executive pulled Amanda aside. "That was impressive. We'd like to offer you $15,000 in seed funding in exchange for 12% equity." Amanda had run the numbers exhaustively. The amount was small, barely enough to build the first version of the platform, but it was a start. She accepted the offer with a firm handshake, fighting to keep her professional composure while excitement bubbled inside her. That night, Amanda's hands shook as she signed the loan documents at her kitchen table. $15,000. More money than she had ever had at once, but a tiny fraction of what she would need to fully realize her vision. The personal guarantee meant her own credit was on the line. If Indie Sound failed, she would be financially devastated. Worth the risk, she whispered to herself as she signed the final page. The next months passed in a blur of activity. Amanda hired 2 part-time developers who worked evenings and weekends to build the platform. She continued at the studio during the day, using her lunch breaks and any spare moment to refine the Indie Sound business model. The platform launched quietly in beta mode 6 months later. Amanda sent invitations to select artists who recorded at the studio, asking them to test the system and provide feedback. The response was overwhelmingly positive. The interface was intuitive, the terms transparent, and the 15% commission significantly lower than competitors. Within weeks, word began to spread through the independent music community. The pivotal moment came when an unknown rapper uploaded his latest single through Indie Sound. The track unexpectedly went viral on social media, generating thousands of streams within days. When the first royalty payment was processed, faster and larger than the artist had ever received, he became an evangelist for the platform, sharing his experience widely online. "I made more from this single through Indie Sound than from my entire previous album through my old distributor," he posted, including screenshots of his earnings dashboard. The post spread rapidly through music communities, bringing a flood of new artists to the platform. Amanda hired her first full-time employee, a customer service representative, to handle the growing volume of questions and sign-ups. With the business showing promising early traction, Amanda rented a tiny office, a single room with 2 desks in a building that had seen better days. For the first time, Ethan attended half-day preschool, a necessary change that tore at Amanda's heart, but gave her crucial hours to focus on growing Indie Sound. The day she received an email from a small investment fund expressing interest in her technology, Amanda felt a surge of validation that brought tears to her eyes. "We've been impressed by Indie Sound's innovative approach to artist-friendly distribution and would like to schedule a meeting to discuss potential investment." As she drafted her reply, Amanda glanced at the framed photo on her desk. Ethan on his 4th birthday, grinning proudly beside the small cake she had managed to provide. Everything she built for him. While celebrating her first major professional achievement, Amanda didn't know that across town, Trevor Reynolds was absently flipping through a financial magazine featuring a small article about promising startups, his eyes skimming past a tiny photo of his ex in the corner of the page. The financial magazine lay open on Trevor Reynolds' desk, his eyes skimming past an article about promising startups in the music industry. A small photo in the corner showed a woman he barely recognized, hair styled differently, posture more confident, a determined look in her eyes. The name beneath the photo made him pause momentarily. Amanda Collins, founder of Indie Sound. He flipped the page without a second thought, unaware that across town, the woman he had once deemed insufficient was methodically building an empire. Amanda stood before a room of venture capitalists, her presentation displayed on the screen behind her. At 31, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had faced rejection and survived. Gone were the worn jeans and tired eyes of the struggling single mother. In their place stood a businesswoman in a tailored blazer, her voice steady as she explained Indie Sound's growth metrics. 2 million users in 3 years with minimal marketing spend, she said, clicking to the next slide. Our user acquisition cost is 68% lower than industry standard because artists themselves become our evangelists. The lead investor, a silver-haired man who had initially seemed skeptical, leaned forward. These retention numbers are impressive. How did you achieve this without significant capital? Amanda smiled. We solved real problems. When artists make more money through our platform than competitors, they stay. When they can actually understand their data and use it to grow their careers, they bring other artists with them. The questions continued for another hour, detailed inquiries about scalability, technology infrastructure, competitive advantages. Amanda answered each with precision, demonstrating intimate knowledge of both the business and technical aspects of her company. "We'd like to offer $500,000 for 20% equity," the lead investor said finally. Subject to due diligence, of course. Amanda's heart raced, but her expression remained composed as she shook hands, sealing the verbal agreement. $500,000, a figure that once seemed unfathomable, now represented just the beginning of what she intended to build. Outside the building, Amanda allowed herself a moment of celebration, calling her most trusted employee. "They're in," she said simply. "We can finally build the team we need." That evening, Amanda picked up Ethan from his after-school program. At 6 years old, he was already remarkable, articulate beyond his years, mathematically gifted, and endlessly curious about how things worked. "How was your meeting?" he asked as they walked home, his small hand in hers. "It went well," Amanda replied, still amazed by his intuitive understanding of her work life. "The investors liked our company." Ethan nodded solemnly. "Good. Your platform helps artists get paid fairly. That's important." The following week brought another milestone. Amanda sat across from a school psychologist, reviewing the results of Ethan's cognitive assessment. "Your son exhibits exceptional intellectual abilities," the psychologist explained, pointing to various metrics on the report. "His mathematical reasoning is particularly advanced, equivalent to someone at least 4 years older." Amanda nodded, unsurprised but concerned about the implications. "What does this mean for his education?" "We recommend accelerated placement," the psychologist said. "Keeping him with his age group could lead to boredom and disengagement. He needs greater intellectual stimulation." 2 months later, with Indie Sound's first major investment secured and Ethan settled into an advanced educational program, Amanda signed the lease on their first real apartment. The 2-bedroom unit in a safe neighborhood with good schools cost 3 times her old rent, but now she could afford it. "This is really ours?" Ethan asked, running from room to room in excitement. "All ours," Amanda confirmed, watching him discover the space that would finally give him his own bedroom. No more folding the sofa bed every morning. That night, after Ethan had fallen asleep in his new room, Amanda stood by the window overlooking the city lights. 7 years had passed since Trevor had walked out of her life, leaving her pregnant and alone with $700. The memory no longer stung as it once had. Instead, it fueled her determination to continue building something extraordinary. With the new investment, Indie Sound expanded rapidly. Amanda hired her first real team, developers to improve the platform, marketing specialists to grow the user base, customer service representatives to support the artists. Each hire was carefully considered, not just for their skills, but for their belief in the company's mission. During the team's first all-hands meeting, Amanda articulated her vision clearly. "We're not just building a distribution service," she explained, standing confidently before her small but growing team. "We're creating a more equitable ecosystem for creators. Every feature we build, every policy we implement, should further that mission." As the company grew, so did Amanda. Gone was the exhausted single mother struggling to survive. In her place emerged a respected CEO with growing industry influence. The transformation wasn't just professional, it was personal and physical as well. 6 months after securing funding, Amanda met with Isabel Chen, a business image consultant recommended by one of her investors. "Your company is gaining traction," Isabel observed, studying Amanda thoughtfully. "But to attract larger investments and establish yourself as an industry leader, we need to refine your executive presence." Amanda glanced down at her sensible but unremarkable outfit. "What did you have in mind?" The consultation led to a complete transformation, a sophisticated haircut that framed her face elegantly, a wardrobe of well-tailored business attire that projected confidence without ostentation, and coaching on everything from posture to presentation skills. "The goal isn't to make you someone else," Isabel explained as Amanda examined her new look in a boutique fitting room mirror. "It's to ensure your external presentation matches the exceptional leader you already are." The investment in her image paid dividends immediately. At industry events where she had once been overlooked, Amanda now commanded attention. Investors who might have dismissed her previously now sought introductions. The quality of her ideas hadn't changed, but the packaging made people more willing to listen. While indie sound thrived, Ethan continued to excel academically. At 8 years old, he competed in his first state mathematics competition, facing students 3 and 4 years his senior. Amanda sat in the audience trying to contain her nervousness as Ethan approached the whiteboard for the final round. His opponent, a 7th grader with multiple competition wins, looked confident. Ethan, small for his age but intensely focused, solved the complex equation with methodical precision. When the judges announced his victory, the pride that swelled in Amanda's chest was almost painful in its intensity. This brilliant, determined child was her greatest achievement, and Trevor had chosen to miss every moment of his development. That evening, celebrating with ice cream at Ethan's favorite shop, Amanda watched her son calculate the tip with effortless mental arithmetic. A thought that had been forming for months crystallized with sudden clarity. Indie sound, for all its success, was just the beginning. The next morning, Amanda called an emergency meeting with her executive team. In the small conference room at their offices, she stood before a whiteboard, marker in hand. "Indie Sound has achieved what we set out to do," she began, drawing a circle around the company's name. "We've created a better distribution model for independent artists. But I've realized there's a much bigger opportunity." She drew a larger circle around the first. "Distribution is just one piece of the puzzle. The real opportunity lies in vertical integration, combining distribution with streaming, content production, and music technology under one artist-centric ecosystem." Her team exchanged glances, intrigued but cautious. "You're talking about competing with the majors," the chief technology officer said. "That's an entirely different ballgame." Amanda nodded. "Exactly. But we have what they don't. Trust from the creator community and a technology platform built from the ground up for the digital age. They're trying to adapt old models. We can build something entirely new." Over the following weeks, Amanda refined her vision for what would become Starlight Entertainment, a comprehensive entertainment company integrating distribution, streaming, production, and technology services. The concept was ambitious, perhaps audaciously so, but Amanda had learned that thinking small was its own form of limitation. Presenting this expanded vision to her investors proved challenging. In a tense meeting at their offices, Amanda faced skepticism from the very people who had backed her initial concept. "You want to sell indie sound to create something bigger?" one investor asked incredulously. "After we just invested in this company, it's incredibly risky." Amanda stood her ground. "Indie sound is valuable. I estimate worth around $2 million today based on current multiples. But it will always be limited by its niche focus. Starlight could be worth $200 million within 5 years." The debate continued for hours. Amanda addressed every objection with data, market analysis, and competitive insights. By the meeting's end, she hadn't won universal support, but she had secured enough interest to explore potential acquisition offers for indie sound. 3 months of intense negotiations followed. Amanda fielded interest from several larger music distribution companies, ultimately receiving 2 serious offers. The higher bid came with strings attached, a 2-year employment contract that would limit her ability to launch Starlight immediately. The lower offer, from a European digital media company, included fewer restrictions but represented 20% less money. After careful consideration, Amanda chose freedom over the higher amount, $2 million with minimal non-compete provisions. The day she signed the sale documents, Amanda experienced a surreal moment of déjà vu. 7 years earlier, Trevor had tossed $700 on her table, declaring it enough to solve her problem. Now she was signing papers that would transfer $2 million to her account, her reward for solving problems he couldn't even recognize. Amanda's hand shook slightly as she signed the final document, making official the sale of her first company. The attorney across the table smiled professionally. "Congratulations, Ms. Collins. The funds should be transferred within 3 business days." That evening, Amanda and Ethan celebrated quietly at home with pizza and ice cream. His choice. At 8 years old, he understood something momentous had occurred but couldn't grasp the full significance. "Does this mean you don't own your company anymore?" he asked, ice cream forming a mustache above his lip. "I sold my first company today," Amanda explained, gently wiping his face. "But it's just the beginning. I'm going to build something even bigger, something that will change the whole industry." Ethan considered this seriously. "Like when I traded my beginner chess set for the advanced one?" Amanda laughed, pulling him into a hug. "Exactly like that. Sometimes you have to let go of something good to create something great." Later that night, after Ethan had gone to bed, Amanda stood at her window watching the city lights. The weight of the day's achievement settled around her shoulders, not as a burden but as a mantle of responsibility and possibility. $2 million had transformed her from a struggling entrepreneur to a legitimate business success, but Amanda knew this was merely the first step in a much longer journey. While savoring her first major financial victory, Amanda didn't imagine that in Wall Street, Trevor Reynolds was being named CEO of his family company, celebrating with champagne in his office, completely unaware of the business hurricane his ex was about to unleash. The champagne bottle in Trevor Reynolds' office remained unopened in its silver bucket, gradually warming to room temperature as he reviewed the quarterly reports for Reynolds Investments. His promotion to CEO following his father's retirement should have felt triumphant, but something nagged at him, a vague dissatisfaction he couldn't quite name. Meanwhile, across the city, Amanda Collins was about to channel her $2 million windfall into a vision that would reshape an entire industry. The temporary office space Amanda had leased for Starlight Entertainment was modest, a converted loft in a trendy district with exposed brick walls and large windows. Standing before a group of potential investors, she exuded confidence that belied the company's nascent status. "Starlight isn't just another record label," Amanda explained, gesturing to the sleek presentation displayed on the wall. "We're creating an integrated entertainment ecosystem where artists maintain ownership while gaining access to distribution, promotion, and monetization tools that were previously available only to those signed with major labels." The lead investor, a venture capitalist who had made his fortune in tech, leaned forward. "Ambitious. What makes you qualified to build something of this scale?" Amanda smiled, having anticipated the question. "I built and sold indie sound for $2 million in just 3 years. But more importantly, I've spent years embedded in the industry, witnessing firsthand the pain points that major labels fail to address. We're not just distributing music, we're reinventing how entertainment is created and consumed." Her passion was persuasive. By the end of the meeting, commitments for $25 million in exchange for 15% equity had been secured, enough capital to transform Starlight from concept to reality. With funding secured, Amanda began assembling her executive team. She sought out industry veterans disillusioned with traditional models, people with both expertise and vision. When Richard Barrett, former VP of Artist Development at Universal Music, walked into her office for an interview, his skepticism was palpable. "Why would I leave one of the biggest labels in the world to join a startup?" he asked bluntly. Amanda met his gaze directly. "Because in 5 years the major labels will be coming to us to learn how to survive. The model is broken, Richard. Artists know it, fans know it, and executives like you know it too." She outlined her vision for Starlight, a company that would leverage technology to create direct connections between artists and audiences, eliminating unnecessary middlemen and ensuring creators received their fair share of revenue. "We're not just responding to changes in the industry," she explained. "We're anticipating them. Digital consumption, social media discovery, virtual experiences, these aren't just trends, they're the new foundation." By the end of the conversation, Richard had signed on as Starlight's chief content officer. Similar conversations followed with other industry veterans, each initially skeptical but ultimately convinced by Amanda's clear-eyed vision and strategic approach. As the company took shape, Ethan, now 11, continued to flourish. One evening, Amanda returned home to find him intensely focused on his laptop, lines of code filling the screen. "What are you working on, sweetheart?" she asked, setting down her briefcase. Ethan looked up, his eyes bright with excitement. "I think I found a pattern in music preferences, Mom. If you analyze listening history alongside contextual factors like time of day, weather, and recent selections, you can predict what someone wants to hear next with surprising accuracy." Amanda looked over his shoulder at the complex algorithm he'd developed, amazement mingling with maternal pride. "Show me how it works." Ethan demonstrated his rudimentary program, explaining how it analyzed data points to generate personalized recommendations. The concept was similar to existing recommendation engines, but his approach incorporated nuanced variables that commercial systems overlooked. "This is remarkable," Amanda said, ideas already forming. "Would you mind showing this to our development team tomorrow?" The next day, Amanda brought Ethan to Starlight's offices. The company's senior engineers gathered around as the 11-year-old walked them through his algorithm, answering their increasingly technical questions with confident precision. "How did a kid develop something that multi-billion-dollar companies spend years trying to perfect?" one engineer whispered to Amanda. She smiled, watching her son in his element. "He sees patterns others miss, always has." Within weeks, Starlight's development team had refined and expanded Ethan's concept into what they called the Ethan algorithm, a sophisticated recommendation engine that would become the core of the company's streaming platform. Early tests showed user engagement increased by over 300% when the algorithm was implemented. The algorithm's success accelerated Starlight's growth trajectory. What had begun as a boutique record label quickly expanded into streaming services and content production. The company's artist-friendly contracts, offering higher royalty percentages and greater creative control, began attracting talent away from traditional labels. The turning point came when Jada Carter, a platinum-selling R&B artist whose contract with a major label was ending, chose to sign with Starlight. "Your terms are better, and your technology is years ahead," she told Amanda during their meeting. "But most importantly, you understand what artists actually need in today's landscape." Jada's signing made headlines throughout the industry. Other established artists began exploring their options, and Starlight's roster grew to include both emerging talent and established names seeking a more equitable partnership. By the time Starlight had been operating for 18 months, the company had outgrown its temporary space. Amanda secured a lease on an entire building in Manhattan, a sleek, modern structure with 22 floors that would soon bear the Starlight name. Standing outside on the day the sign was installed, Amanda felt a surge of emotion as the illuminated letters were tested against the afternoon sky. From a struggling singer abandoned while pregnant to the founder and CEO of a rapidly growing entertainment company, the journey seemed almost unreal. "It looks awesome, Mom," Ethan said, standing beside her on the sidewalk. Now 12, he had skipped another grade and was studying advanced mathematics with university tutors alongside his regular schoolwork. "It does, doesn't it?" Amanda put her arm around his shoulders, noticing with a start that he nearly reached her height. "I couldn't have done any of this without you, you know." As Starlight expanded, Ethan's academic advancement continued to astonish his teachers. His mathematical abilities had progressed far beyond the standard curriculum, requiring specialized instruction from university professors who were often startled by his intuitive grasp of complex concepts. He should be considering early college placement, his academic advisor suggested during a conference. "There's simply nothing more we can offer him at this level." Amanda balanced pride in her son's extraordinary gifts with concern about his social development. What about his emotional well-being? He's still just a child. Ethan is unusual in that regard as well, the advisor explained. His emotional intelligence matches his intellectual abilities. He connects well with older students and adults while maintaining friendships with peers. It's quite remarkable. As Ethan's education progressed along its accelerated path, Starlight Entertainment continued its rapid ascent. The Ethan algorithm had evolved into an industry-leading technology platform that powered not only Starlight's streaming service but also its content recommendation systems and artist analytics tools. The company's first major breakthrough came when an independent artist signed to Starlight achieved a #1 hit, a feat previously considered impossible without major label support. The song, a genre-blending track with captivating lyrics, connected with listeners in a way that challenged conventional industry wisdom. "This changes everything," music publications declared. Starlight has proven the major label system is no longer the only path to mainstream success. Industry veterans who had dismissed Starlight as a niche player suddenly found themselves struggling to explain the company's success to their boards. Major labels began offering increasingly generous contracts to prevent their artists from defecting, while simultaneously attempting to mimic Starlight's technology platforms, usually with limited success. 4 years after founding Starlight, Amanda received a call from her publicist. "Forbes wants to feature you on their cover. The Entertainment Revolutionary is their working title." The photo shoot took place in Starlight's headquarters, with Amanda posed against the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. The interviewer, clearly impressed by both Amanda's personal story and business acumen, asked penetrating questions about her journey. "Did you always envision building something of this scale?" he inquired. Amanda considered the question. "I knew the industry needed transformation. What began as a solution to a specific problem, fair compensation for independent artists, evolved into something much more comprehensive as we identified additional opportunities." The resulting article, "The Revolutionary Reshaping Entertainment," provided Amanda's first significant media exposure. The piece detailed her rise from struggling singer to influential CEO, though it mentioned nothing of her personal struggles as a single mother or the circumstances of Ethan's birth. Those details remained private, protected from public scrutiny. When the Forbes issue hit newsstands, Amanda purchased a copy on her way to the office. Seeing her own image on the cover, confident, polished, standing before the Starlight logo, felt surreal. She remembered the exhausted young woman who had once counted pennies to buy formula, who had been told she wasn't enough, that her talent was insignificant. That evening, Starlight's executive team gathered to celebrate an extraordinary milestone. The company's valuation had officially reached $1 billion, making it a unicorn in investment parlance. Amanda opened champagne in the boardroom, proposing a toast to the team that had helped build something remarkable in such a short time. "This is just the beginning," she reminded them, glasses raised. "We've proven our model works. Now we scale." After the celebration, Amanda took Ethan to the building's helipad. The private helicopter that now facilitated her increasingly busy schedule sat gleaming in the evening light, the Starlight logo emblazoned on its side. They stood together at the edge of the platform, looking out over Manhattan's glittering skyline. "See, son?" Amanda said softly, her arm around his shoulders. "We built this from zero." Ethan, now 13 and nearly as tall as his mother, nodded thoughtfully. "Do you ever wonder if he knows? My father?" The question caught Amanda off guard. They rarely discussed Trevor, though she had always answered Ethan's questions honestly when they arose. "I don't know," she answered truthfully. "Perhaps." What Amanda couldn't know was that her Forbes cover had indeed found its way to Trevor Reynolds' desk. He had stared at the image of his former girlfriend, now transformed into a poised, powerful CEO, with a growing sense of unease that he couldn't quite name. While she admired the empire she had built, Amanda didn't realize that her Forbes cover magazine had landed on Trevor Reynolds' desk, who now observed with increasing discomfort the woman he once considered insufficient transform into the new dominant force in the industry. Trevor Reynolds' hand trembled slightly as he closed the Forbes magazine, his own reflection staring back at him from the glossy cover showing Amanda Collins. Something cold and uncomfortable settled in his stomach. Not quite regret, but a disquieting awareness that he had catastrophically misjudged someone. He slipped the magazine into his desk drawer, burying it beneath contracts and reports, as if hiding the evidence of his error in judgment. Meanwhile, across Manhattan, Amanda strode confidently into the Starlight Entertainment boardroom, her Louboutin heels clicking against the marble floor. The room fell silent as she approached the head of the table. "The acquisition of Pacific Records is complete," she announced to her executive team. $350 million, 20% below market value. She tapped her tablet, sending the details to the large screen on the wall. "They were hemorrhaging artists to our streaming platform, so it was acquire or watch them collapse." Leonard Chen, her chief financial officer, nodded appreciatively. "Their catalog of classic jazz and blues recordings alone is worth the purchase price. The analytics show our users have a surprisingly strong affinity for vintage recordings when properly recommended by the Ethan algorithm." Amanda smiled at the mention of her son's innovation. What had begun as a 13-year-old's experiment had evolved into the technological heart of Starlight's success. A recommendation engine so sophisticated that competitors couldn't replicate it despite investing millions in their attempts. "Speaking of Ethan," Amanda's assistant said from the doorway, "he's online too. Says it's important but not urgent." Amanda excused herself, taking the call in her private office, a corner suite on the 45th floor with panoramic views of the city through floor-to-ceiling windows. "Mom, I think I've solved that issue with the regional preference anomaly," Ethan said, his voice carrying the slight deepening of adolescence. Now 14, he was participating in a special research program at MIT, his mathematical abilities having long outpaced what even the most advanced high schools could offer. "The algorithm wasn't accounting for cultural context in non-Western markets. I've recalibrated the weighting factors and increased accuracy by 17% in initial testing. I'm sending you the revised code now." "That's brilliant, honey," Amanda replied, genuine pride warming her voice. "The development team will be thrilled. How's everything else at MIT?" "Challenging in the best way," Ethan answered. "Professor Harrington says my approach to computational modeling is refreshingly unorthodox. I think that's a compliment." After they hung up, Amanda stood at her window, watching the city below. At 38, she had built Starlight Entertainment from a concept into a $4 billion company employing over 2,000 people across 3 continents. The industry that had once dismissed her now followed her lead, with major labels scrambling to adapt to the models Starlight had pioneered. Yet for all her professional success, her greatest pride remained Ethan. His extraordinary intellect was matched by uncommon emotional maturity and kindness. Despite skipping 3 grades and now taking university courses, he maintained close friendships and navigated social situations with remarkable ease. "Ms. Collins," her assistant interrupted her thoughts, "the editorial board from Fortune just called. You've been selected as Entrepreneur of the Year. They'd like to schedule a photo shoot next week." Amanda nodded, making a mental note. After the Forbes cover, other recognitions had followed. Fortune's Most Powerful Women in Business, Time's 100 Most Influential People, The Wall Street Journal's Innovator of the Year. Each accolade felt less like personal validation and more like confirmation that her vision for the industry had been correct. "Also," her assistant continued, "don't forget the charity gala at the Plaza Hotel tonight. The Starlight Foundation is launching the scholarship program." The Starlight Foundation for Single Mothers had become Amanda's personal passion project. Launched 3 years earlier with $20 million of her own money, the foundation provided housing assistance, child care subsidies, and educational grants to women raising children alone. The car will be ready at 7, Amanda confirmed. Ethan's flying in for the event. His plane lands at 5. That evening, as her private car navigated through Manhattan traffic, Amanda reviewed the speech she would deliver announcing the foundation's newest initiative, a $25 million scholarship fund for single mothers pursuing higher education. "You look beautiful, Mom," Ethan said beside her, handsome in his tailored suit. At 14, he had Trevor's height and strong jawline, but his expressions carried Amanda's warmth and thoughtfulness. "Thank you, sweetheart." She squeezed his hand, feeling a swell of emotion. "This night means a lot to me. These scholarships will change lives." "Like education changed yours," he observed perceptively. Amanda nodded. Those online business courses she had taken years ago, studying after Ethan was asleep, had provided the knowledge foundation upon which she'd built everything that followed. As their car approached the Plaza Hotel, Amanda felt a strange flutter of anticipation, not for the event, but something less definable. She dismissed it as pre-speech nervousness, though public speaking had long since ceased to intimidate her. Inside the grand ballroom, New York's elite circulated beneath crystal chandeliers. Corporate executives, celebrities, politicians, and philanthropists had gathered to support the Starlight Foundation's mission. Amanda moved through the crowd with practiced ease, graciously accepting congratulations and making introductions. "Your foundation's work is extraordinary," said Senator Elizabeth Mitchell, touching Amanda's arm. "The child care initiative alone has helped thousands of women remain in the workforce." "It's personal for me," Amanda replied. "I was fortunate enough to find a path forward, but too many women with potential never get that chance." As the evening progressed, Amanda was unexpectedly approached by Catherine Reynolds, Trevor's mother. The older woman had aged noticeably since Amanda had last seen her 15 years earlier. "Amanda," Catherine said, her voice carrying the polished tones of old money, "I hoped I might see you tonight. You've done remarkable things with Starlight." Amanda maintained her composure, though surprise rippled through her. "Thank you, Mrs. Reynolds. I wasn't aware you followed the entertainment industry." "I follow success stories," the older woman replied with a small smile, "and yours is quite extraordinary. Is your son here tonight? I believe he would be about 15 now." The question carried layers of implication. Catherine had never acknowledged Ethan's existence when Amanda was pregnant, supporting her son's abandonment with cold silence. "Ethan is 14, Amanda confirmed neutrally. "And yes, he's here." Before the conversation could continue, Ethan himself appeared at Amanda's side, unaware of the older woman's identity. "Mom, Mr. Jacobson from MIT wants to introduce me to some potential investors for that music education algorithm we discussed," he said, then noticed Catherine. "I'm sorry for interrupting." Catherine's eyes widened almost imperceptibly as she took in Ethan's appearance, the unmistakable Reynolds features evident in his face. "Not at all," she recovered quickly. "I'm Catherine Reynolds. I was just catching up with your mother." Ethan's quick mind registered the last name immediately, a flicker of recognition crossing his face. Amanda had never hidden the identity of his father, answering his questions honestly but without bitterness as he grew older. "It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Reynolds," he said politely, offering his hand with perfect social grace. After Catherine moved on, Ethan turned to Amanda with a question in his eyes. "Was that your grandmother?" Amanda confirmed quietly. "First time she's acknowledged either of us." Ethan processed this with his characteristic thoughtfulness. "Is my father here too?" "I don't know," Amanda admitted. "I haven't seen him." Throughout the evening, Amanda found herself scanning the crowd, a mixture of dread and curiosity propelling her gaze. The Reynolds family traditionally supported many of the same charitable causes that attracted Starlight Foundation donors. It wasn't unreasonable that Trevor might be present. The thought of encountering him after 15 years stirred complicated emotions. Amanda had long since moved past the pain of his rejection, transforming it into the determination that built her success. Yet something remained unresolved, not because she needed closure, but because the story had never been properly concluded. As she prepared to take the stage for her speech, Amanda caught sight of a familiar profile across the room. Trevor Reynolds, silver now threading his dark hair, stood conversing with a group of finance executives. He hadn't seen her yet, his attention focused on the conversation. Amanda felt a curious detachment, as if observing a character from a book she'd read long ago. The man who had once wielded such power over her emotions now seemed smaller somehow, less significant than the memory she had carried. "Ms. Collins," the event coordinator touched her elbow, "we're ready for you." On stage, beneath the spotlight, Amanda addressed the gathered elite with practiced confidence. She spoke about opportunity and access, about the transformative power of education and support at critical moments. Without referencing her personal history directly, she infused her words with the authenticity of lived experience. The Starlight Scholarship Program will provide full university tuition for 100 single mothers annually, she announced to enthusiastic applause. Because talent and potential are equally distributed throughout our society, but opportunity is not. Together, we can change that equation. From the podium, Amanda could see Trevor in the audience, his expression stunned as he finally recognized her. Their eyes met briefly across the crowded room, a fleeting connection laden with 15 years of unspoken history. Later, as donors approached to offer congratulations, Amanda felt a presence at her elbow. She turned to find Ethan, his expression thoughtful. "That man has been watching you," he said quietly. "The one talking to Mrs. Reynolds now. He looks like me." Amanda followed his gaze to where Trevor stood with his mother, both of them glancing repeatedly in their direction. "That's Trevor Reynolds," she confirmed gently. "Your biological father." Ethan absorbed this information with remarkable composure. Over the years, he had asked questions about his father, and Amanda had answered truthfully but without rancor, explaining that Trevor had chosen not to be part of their lives. She had never shared the cruelty of his rejection, never wanting Ethan to feel the sting of being deemed unworthy. "Would you like to meet him?" Amanda asked, prepared to support whatever choice Ethan made. "Not tonight," Ethan decided after consideration. "Maybe someday, but I'd want to understand why first, why he wasn't there." Amanda nodded, proud of his maturity. "That's entirely your decision, sweetheart. Always has been." As they prepared to leave the gala, Amanda's assistant approached with an update. "The event has raised over $12 million for the foundation, and Rolling Stone wants to interview you next week about Starlight's expansion into film production." Amanda confirmed the appointment as they walked toward the exit. The upcoming expansion into film and television production would increase Starlight's market value by an estimated 20%, further cementing its position as an entertainment powerhouse. In the car heading home, Ethan was unusually quiet, looking out at the city lights. "Are you okay?" Amanda asked gently. Seeing him must have been strange. "I'm fine," he assured her. "Just thinking about how different things might have been if he had stayed." Amanda considered her response carefully. "We can't know that path, sweetheart. We can only appreciate the one we've traveled." That night, after Ethan had gone to bed, Amanda stood at the window of their penthouse apartment, looking out over the city that had once seemed so hostile to her dreams. From struggling single mother to billionaire CEO, a transformation that would have seemed impossible on that night 15 years ago when Trevor had walked out her door. As she prepared for bed, Amanda didn't realize that fate had set in motion a confrontation 15 years in the making. In his Upper East Side penthouse, Trevor Reynolds lay awake, the image of Amanda, confident, successful, admired, and the boy who was unmistakably his son burning in his mind, awakening questions and regrets long suppressed. While she prepared for the charity event, Amanda didn't realize that fate had prepared a meeting that would reopen old wounds. Trevor Reynolds, now CEO of Reynolds Investments after his father's retirement, would also be at the Plaza Hotel for a coinciding family celebration. The crimson Versace dress caught the light as Amanda made a final adjustment in the mirror of her penthouse. She had selected it carefully, bold but elegant, a statement piece that communicated confidence without ostentation. The color choice wasn't accidental. Red had always been her power color, dating back to the first important business meeting she'd ever taken. "You look stunning, Mom," Ethan said, adjusting his bow tie as he entered her bedroom. At 14, he already stood nearly 6 feet tall, his tailored tuxedo emphasizing his lanky frame. "And you look incredibly handsome," Amanda replied, touched by how grown-up her son appeared. "Harvard and Stanford will be fighting over you in a few years." "MIT already sent another letter," Ethan mentioned casually. "They're offering early admission with a full research fellowship when I turn 16. Amanda smiled, pride swelling in her chest. Her son's extraordinary intellect had opened doors that would have seemed impossible on that cold night when Trevor had walked out, tossing money on her table like she was nothing more than an inconvenience to be settled. "Ready to go?" she asked, gathering her clutch. The foundation team has been at the plaza since noon setting up. Their private elevator descended directly to the garage where a gleaming black limousine awaited. As they settled into the leather seats, Amanda reviewed her notes for the evening's speech one last time. The Starlight Foundation's scholarship program represented everything she had wished for during those desperate early years, support that recognized potential and created opportunity. "Nervous?" Ethan asked, observing her concentrated expression. Amanda shook her head. "Not about the speech, just wanting everything to be perfect. These scholarships will change lives." Across town, in the opulent master bathroom of his Park Avenue penthouse, Trevor Reynolds adjusted his bow tie with practiced precision. At 42, he still cut an impressive figure, athletic build maintained by a private trainer, hair now distinguished with subtle silver at the temples. The Wall Street Journal had recently listed him among New York's most eligible bachelors, conveniently overlooking the fact that he had been married for a decade. "Trevor, darling," called Victoria Reynolds from the bedroom, "we're going to be late for Alexander's birthday celebration." He emerged from the bathroom to find his wife fastening a diamond necklace worth more than most people's homes. Victoria Huntington Reynolds, former model, current socialite, and daughter of one of New York's oldest banking families, was the perfect corporate wife. Their marriage had been more merger than romance, a strategic alliance that elevated both families' social standings. "The reservation isn't until 8, Trevor replied, checking his watch, a Patek Philippe passed down from his grandfather. "We have time." "Yes, but I want to make an entrance," Victoria said, smoothing her designer gown. "And the plaza will be absolutely crawling with the charity crowd tonight. Some foundation event in the main ballroom." Trevor nodded absently, his mind already drifting to the quarterly projections he'd been reviewing earlier. Reynolds Investments had performed adequately under his leadership. Not spectacularly, but solidly enough to maintain the family's $800 million fortune while generating respectable returns for clients. "Speaking of charity events," Victoria continued, inspecting her reflection, "did you see who's hosting tonight's gala? Amanda Collins, that woman from Starlight Entertainment?" She turned to gauge his reaction. The Fortune profile last month called her the most disruptive force in entertainment since streaming began. Trevor froze, his hand suddenly clumsy with his cufflink. "Amanda Collins? At the plaza tonight?" Victoria nodded, oblivious to his discomfort. "Her foundation does something with single mothers. Rather convenient branding considering her own background." She sniffed dismissively. "Though I suppose one must admire the business acumen. From nowhere to billionaire in 15 years. "Billionaire?" Trevor echoed, the word sticking in his throat. "Well, near enough. Fortune estimated her net worth at $1.2 billion. Victoria tilted her head, finally noticing his strange expression. "Trevor, are you all right? You look pale." He forced a smile. "Fine. Just remembered something about tomorrow's meeting." His mind raced, calculating the odds of encountering Amanda in the vast Plaza Hotel. Surely the charity event and Alexander's birthday dinner would be in separate areas. The plaza had multiple ballrooms, restaurants, and private dining spaces. The chances were minimal. The sleek limousine carrying Amanda and Ethan glided to a stop before the Plaza Hotel's grand entrance. Doormen in crisp uniforms rushed forward as the chauffeur opened the door. Flashbulbs popped immediately. The financial and entertainment press had been alerted to the Starlight Foundation's event, and Amanda Collins was always newsworthy. "Ms. Collins, over here! Ethan, are you following your mother into business? Amanda, is Starlight acquiring Meridian Pictures?" Amanda navigated the gauntlet with practiced ease, offering a polite smile but no comments, her hand gently guiding Ethan through the commotion. Inside the lobby, the Foundation's event coordinator rushed forward. "Everything's perfect," she assured Amanda. "We've already raised $3 million in pre-event donations, and the ballroom is at capacity." Amanda nodded appreciatively. "And the scholarship recipients?" "All 8 are here with their families, seated at the center tables as you requested." The plaza's grand ballroom had been transformed for the evening. Subtle lighting cast a warm glow over tables adorned with elegant centerpieces in the Foundation's signature colors. A string quartet played softly as New York's elite networked over champagne and hors d'oeuvres. At the front, a stage featured the Starlight Foundation's logo, a stylized star illuminating a path forward. As Amanda entered, a subtle ripple of recognition spread through the crowd. Conversations paused momentarily as heads turned. She moved through the room with Ethan at her side, stopping to greet major donors and introduce her son to key supporters. "Senator Mitchell, wonderful to see you again," Amanda said, shaking hands with the influential politician. "Have you met my son, Ethan?" The senator smiled warmly. "I've heard remarkable things about your work at MIT, young man. Your algorithm is revolutionizing educational access in underserved communities." Ethan engaged confidently in the conversation, his social skills as exceptional as his intellect. Amanda watched with quiet pride as her son discussed the technical aspects of his latest project, remembering the infant she had once cradled while wondering how they would survive the month. In the plaza's elegant terrace room, Trevor and Victoria Reynolds arrived for their son's birthday celebration. 8-year-old Alexander Reynolds, already displaying the family's characteristic confidence, greeted arriving guests with his maternal grandmother hovering nearby. The private dining room had been decorated lavishly, no expense spared for the heir to the Reynolds fortune. "Trevor, darling," Victoria murmured as they accepted champagne from a passing waiter, "you'll never guess who I just spotted in the main hallway. Amanda Collins and her son. He looks remarkably like you did in your Exeter graduation photos." The champagne flute froze halfway to Trevor's lips. "You must be mistaken." Victoria laughed lightly. "Impossible. That bone structure is distinctly Reynolds." Catherine noticed it too. "She's looking quite shaken." She nodded toward her mother-in-law, who was indeed looking disturbed as she spoke with Trevor's father in a corner. "I should check on Alexander," Trevor said abruptly, setting down his untouched champagne. As the evening progressed, the walls between the separate events began to dissolve. Guests from the charity gala wandered into the hotel's public spaces during breaks, while members of the Reynolds party circulated through the main hallways between courses. The collision course was set, merely awaiting its moment. Amanda was deep in conversation with a tech billionaire interested in supporting the Foundation's digital literacy program when Catherine Reynolds approached, her expression carefully controlled. "Amanda, I wanted to personally congratulate you on the scholarship initiative," she said, her voice carrying the practiced warmth of old money. "Education changed the trajectory of our family 3 generations ago." "Thank you, Mrs. Reynolds," Amanda replied evenly. "That's precisely why we've focused on educational access. It's the most reliable path to economic mobility." Catherine's eyes drifted to where Ethan stood conversing with a group of MIT professors. Your son is remarkable. A credit to your parenting. The subtle emphasis on "your" didn't escape Amanda's notice. Before she could respond, a commotion near the ballroom entrance drew their attention. Trevor Reynolds had entered the charity gala, ostensibly to find his mother, but his eyes scanned the room with barely concealed tension. He moved through the crowd with the entitled confidence of someone accustomed to deference, but there was something almost frantic in his gaze. The moment froze in perfect cinematic timing, Amanda turning from her conversation with Catherine, Trevor stopping dead in his tracks as their eyes met across the crowded room. 15 years collapsed into a single heartbeat. Amanda maintained her composure with remarkable control, only a slight tightening of her fingers around her champagne flute betraying any reaction. Trevor, however, visibly paled, his confident posture faltering momentarily. "I believe my son is looking for me," Catherine murmured, a strange note in her voice as she observed the silent exchange. "If you'll excuse me." Left alone, Amanda turned to speak with Senator Mitchell about proposed legislation affecting digital royalties. Her voice remained steady, her focus sharp, but she was acutely aware of Trevor's presence as he conferred with his mother across the room, both of them casting glances in her direction. "Amanda, the Secretary of Commerce has been hoping to discuss your proposal on international intellectual property protections," the senator was saying. "He's just arrived if you have a moment." "Of course," Amanda replied, turning to follow the senator's gesture and finding herself face to face with Trevor Reynolds. Time seemed to stop. The noise of the crowded ballroom receded. 15 years since he had stood in her tiny apartment, tossing money on her table, telling her she wasn't enough. "Trevor Reynolds," Amanda said, her voice controlled, betraying nothing of the complex emotions beneath the surface. "What a coincidence." Trevor struggled to recover his composure, eyes taking in the transformation before him. The woman he had dismissed as insignificant now stood before him in Versace, the center of power in a room full of the elite. "Amanda, you look different." A cold smile touched her lips. "Different from when you left me pregnant with $700 to solve the problem?" "Yes, I imagine I do." The color drained from Trevor's face as his own cruel words returned to haunt him. Before he could respond, movement caught his eye, Ethan approaching, curious about the palpable tension. "Mom, is everything okay?" Ethan asked, his perceptive gaze taking in the situation. Trevor couldn't tear his eyes from the teenager, the living embodiment of his greatest mistake. The boy was unmistakably his son, from the set of his jaw to the intelligent assessment in his eyes. Yet there was something in his bearing, a quiet confidence and emotional intelligence, that was purely Amanda. "This is my son, Ethan Collins," Amanda said, emphasizing the surname. "Ethan, this is Trevor Reynolds, a known acquaintance from the past." Understanding dawned in Ethan's eyes as he connected the name to the little he knew about his biological father. His analytical gaze assessed Trevor with the same precision he applied to complex equations. "You're the CEO of Reynolds Investments," Ethan observed calmly. "I read about your recent acquisition of Nexus Capital. Interesting structure, though the valuation algorithm you used seems to have overvalued the assets by approximately 12%. Trevor blinked, disconcerted by the teenager's precise analysis. "You follow corporate acquisitions?" "I follow innovative mathematical models," Ethan replied. "Financial systems provide fascinating data sets." The circle around them expanded as people recognized Amanda and approached. A famous music producer joined the group, clapping Ethan warmly on the shoulder. "Amanda, that music discovery algorithm your son developed has revolutionized our industry," he enthused. "Pure genius. We've increased new artist engagement by 40% since implementing it." Trevor's expression shifted between shock and growing dismay as more people joined the conversation, each interaction revealing another facet of the extraordinary life his abandoned son had built without him. "Amanda," he said finally, desperation edging into his voice, "perhaps we could speak privately." There's much to discuss after so many years. She met his gaze with cool assessment. Actually, there isn't. You made your decision 15 years ago when you said I wasn't enough to stand beside you. That people like me are born to serve people like you. Do you remember those exact words? The color drained from Trevor's face as his own cruel declarations echoed in the present. Several guests nearby exchanged shocked glances, whispers beginning to circulate. The circumstances were different, he attempted to justify, his voice low. I was young, pressured by family expectations. How interesting, Amanda interrupted. I was young too, pregnant, abandoned, and working 3 jobs to survive. Ethan was born while I was still completing my business degree online at night. Victoria appeared at Trevor's side, sensing disaster unfolding. Trevor, Alexander is looking for you to cut the cake. Amanda raised an eyebrow. You have another son? Congratulations. I hope you've been a better father to him. While presenting her son to Trevor, Amanda didn't imagine that this casual encounter would be merely the prelude to a public confrontation that would expose 15 years of secrets and forever transform the carefully constructed reputation of Trevor Reynolds. Victoria's words hung in the air like a loaded gun. The revelation of Trevor's second son, a child he had actively chosen to parent, created a palpable shift in the atmosphere around them. Whispers rippled through the gathering crowd as New York's elite recognized the unfolding drama in their midst. Trevor's face contorted with panic, his eyes darting between Amanda's cool composure and Ethan's analytical gaze. Victoria, take Alexander back to the party, he instructed, his voice tight. I'll be there shortly. Confusion and anger flashed across Victoria's face as comprehension dawned. Trevor, what's happening? Who is this boy? Her eyes narrowed as she studied Ethan's features, the undeniable Reynolds resemblance impossible to ignore. Perhaps your husband should explain, Amanda suggested, her tone polite but edged with steel. Though based on experience, full disclosure isn't his strong suit. Ethan watched the exchange with remarkable composure, processing the complex adult dynamics with the same methodical approach he applied to mathematical problems. You have another son, he stated, not a question but a simple observation directed at Trevor. Does he enjoy mathematics as well? The innocent inquiry delivered with such calm curiosity seemed to devastate Trevor more than any accusation could have. He's 8, he managed, looking physically ill. He likes soccer. I played soccer briefly, Ethan replied conversationally. Found it statistically inefficient. 22 players, 1 ball, average player possession under 3 minutes per 90-minute game. A distinguished-looking man in the gathering circle chuckled. That's why we recruited him to MIT. Extraordinary mind. He extended his hand to Trevor. Professor James Harrington, Computational Sciences. Your son's algorithm has revolutionized how we approach predictive modeling across multiple fields. Trevor shook the professor's hand mechanically, the words, your son, landing like physical blows. I wasn't aware, he began, then stopped, realizing there was no acceptable way to complete that sentence. Victoria's voice cut through the awkward moment, sharp with growing anger. Trevor, I don't understand. Who exactly is this young man? Before Trevor could answer, a well-known music executive joined the circle, his face lighting up at the sight of Ethan. There's our young genius. The Ethan algorithm increased our new artist discovery rate by 40%. We're implementing the expanded version next quarter. More people pressed forward, each offering similar praise for Ethan's innovations or Amanda's business leadership, unintentionally driving home the magnitude of what Trevor had abandoned. With each accolade, Trevor seemed to physically diminish, his carefully constructed self-image crumbling under the weight of his mistake. Amanda observed the spectacle with detached interest, feeling neither vindication nor satisfaction, merely a calm acknowledgement of truth finally exposed. Ethan, she said gently, we should prepare for the scholarship presentation. It begins in 15 minutes. Ethan nodded, then turned to Trevor with unexpected grace. It was interesting to meet you, Mr. Reynolds. Perhaps another time we could discuss your quantitative approach to market valuations. I have some thoughts on improving accuracy. The simple courtesy extended by the son he had never known seemed to break something in Trevor. I would like that very much, he managed, his voice thick with emotion he clearly wasn't accustomed to feeling. As Amanda and Ethan moved toward the stage, Victoria grabbed Trevor's arm with bruising force. "Outside! Now!" she hissed, her socialite composure fracturing. They exited to a private alcove off the main hallway, her expression thunderous. "You have a son?" she demanded, voice low but vibrating with fury. "A teenage son you never once mentioned in 10 years of marriage? With Amanda Collins of all people?" Trevor loosened his bow tie, suddenly struggling to breathe. "It was before us, before you and I met. You told me you never had serious relationships before me," Victoria spat. "Now I discover you not only had a relationship with one of the most powerful women in New York, but you fathered her child and apparently abandoned them both?" "It wasn't like that," Trevor attempted, though they both recognized the lie. "I was young, focused on my career." "Spare me," Victoria cut him off. "Alexander's birthday celebration is ruined, and tomorrow our name will be in every gossip column in the city. Reynolds CEO abandons billionaire's son. Your mother looks like she might collapse, and your father is already making calls to the PR team." Inside the ballroom, Amanda took the stage as planned, her composure unshaken by the confrontation. Her voice carried confidently through the space as she introduced the first recipients of the Starlight Scholarship for Single Mothers, 8 women from diverse backgrounds who would receive full university funding and living stipends. "Each of these remarkable women has demonstrated extraordinary potential while raising children alone," Amanda said, genuine emotion warming her voice. "Tonight, we remove the financial barriers between them and their dreams." As the recipients joined her on stage, each sharing brief, powerful stories of their journeys, Ethan watched from the front row with evident pride. This was his mother's true legacy, not the billions she had accumulated or the industry she had transformed, but the ladder she was building for others to climb. Across the room, Trevor had returned alone, Victoria having departed with Alexander and his grandparents. He stood in the shadows, watching the woman he had once dismissed as insignificant now commanding the attention and respect of everyone present. After the ceremony, as guests began departing, Amanda found herself approached by a reporter from the Wall Street Journal. "Ms. Collins, there's a rumor circulating that your son is actually the biological child of Trevor Reynolds. Would you care to comment?" Amanda's expression remained neutral. "My son's achievements stand on their own merits, regardless of biology. If you're looking for a story, I'd suggest focusing on the scholarship recipients and their potential impact on their communities," the reporter persisted. "But is it true? Is Trevor Reynolds the father?" "My son has my last name because I raised him," Amanda replied with finality. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have guests to thank." By morning, despite Amanda's attempt at discretion, carefully worded articles appeared in select publications. Family Connection, Starlight CEO's son bears striking resemblance to finance mogul in the Business Insider, Reynolds heir apparent, tech prodigy's paternity raises questions in the New York Post. The more reputable outlets framed the story differently. Abandoned by finance CEO, Starlight founder built billion-dollar empire as single mother in the Wall Street Journal. Amanda Collins reveals struggle before success. I was a mother first, CEO second, in Forbes Digital. Trevor stared at the headlines on his tablet, sitting alone in his home office. Victoria had taken Alexander to her parents' estate on Long Island, her parting words still burning in his ears. "Fix this before we return, or don't bother coming to Southampton at all." The Reynolds Investments crisis management team had been working since dawn. 3 clients had already called to express concerns, all using careful language that masked their real question. How could they trust a man who had hidden such a significant personal failure? Trevor's phone buzzed with a text from his father. Board meeting called for 3 p.m. Be prepared to address this directly. At Starlight headquarters, Amanda maintained her normal schedule, refusing to feed the media frenzy. When her PR director suggested leveraging the situation for positive coverage, she shook her head firmly. "We don't build our brand on personal stories, and we certainly don't exploit my son's privacy for corporate advantage," she stated unequivocally. "Issue a simple statement confirming Ethan is my son, that his father has not been involved in his life, and that we request privacy as a family. Then we continue with business as usual." Ethan, remarkably unperturbed by the sudden public interest in his parentage, video called from MIT. "Are you okay, Mom?" he asked, his concern entirely for her well-being. "I'm fine, sweetheart," Amanda assured him. "This will blow over quickly. The news cycle is relentless. Tomorrow they'll be focused on something else." Ethan nodded thoughtfully. "I've been thinking about him, about Trevor. Why didn't you ever tell me how cruel he was when he left?" Amanda sighed, choosing her words carefully. "Because I never wanted you to feel the weight of his rejection. Your story isn't defined by his absence, Ethan. It's written in your own remarkable accomplishments and the person you've become." "He looks sad," Ethan observed with unexpected insight. Not just embarrassed or caught, genuinely sad about what he missed. In the following days, the story evolved in the press, with past associates of Trevor coming forward with accounts of his ruthless business tactics and callous personal behavior. Former girlfriends described a pattern of emotional detachment. Business rivals detailed cutthroat maneuvers that bordered on unethical. The carefully constructed image Trevor had maintained, the respected financial leader with impeccable family values, unraveled thread by thread. Reynolds' investment stock dropped 6% in 2 days as clients quietly began moving assets to competitors. In their Park Avenue apartment, Victoria packed additional suitcases, her expression glacial. "The Hendersons uninvited us from their gala next month," she informed Trevor. 30 years of family connection erased because you're now a liability." "Victoria, please," Trevor began, but she cut him off with a raised hand. "My father called this morning. The Huntington family name cannot be associated with someone who abandons his child. Fix this, Trevor, or our marriage will be the next casualty." On the 3rd day after the Plaza event, Trevor appeared unannounced in the lobby of Starlight Entertainment. Security immediately moved to intercept him, but he raised his hands in a gesture of peaceful intent. "Please," he said, the desperation evident in his voice. "I just need to speak with Amanda Collins. Tell her Trevor Reynolds is here." The security team exchanged glances before one made a call. Minutes stretched into a half hour as Trevor waited, perched uncomfortably on the edge of a sleek lobby chair, surrounded by platinum records and movie posters bearing the Starlight logo. Finally, an assistant appeared. "Ms. Collins will see you, briefly." She led him to a private elevator that ascended directly to the executive floor. Amanda's office occupied the corner of the 45th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of Manhattan. She sat behind a modern desk, her expression composed and professional as Trevor was shown in. As the door closed behind him, leaving them alone for the first time in 15 years, Trevor realized with crushing clarity that the woman before him, poised, powerful, successful beyond imagination, was someone he had never truly known, and it was entirely his loss. While Trevor remained paralyzed in the hall, watching his reputation crumble before his eyes, he couldn't imagine that the true reckoning was yet to come, when Amanda would finally allow him to glimpse the empire he could have shared. Amanda's office stretched before Trevor like a physical manifestation of everything he had missed. Awards lined the walls, Grammys, Emmys, Billboard honors, and framed magazine covers featuring her confident smile. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Manhattan, the skyline dotted with buildings bearing the Starlight logo. The message was unmistakable. She owned pieces of the city that had once seemed to belong exclusively to men like him. "You have 5 minutes," Amanda said, her voice neutral as she gestured to a chair across from her desk. "My next meeting can't be rescheduled." Trevor remained standing, suddenly unsure what to do with his hands. The confident financier who commanded boardrooms had vanished, replaced by a man confronting the magnitude of his greatest mistake. "I came to apologize," he began, the words sounding hollow even to his own ears. "What I did 15 years ago was unforgivable." Amanda's expression remained impassive. "Is that all? You could have sent an email." "I want to know my son," Trevor continued, desperation creeping into his voice. "I've missed everything. His childhood, his achievements. That algorithm everyone keeps talking about. I don't even understand what it does." It revolutionized how music and content are recommended to users based on emotional response patterns rather than just consumption habits, Amanda explained clinically. Ethan developed the core concept at 11. By 14, he had refined it into what now powers Starlight's entire ecosystem. Microsoft offered $900 million for the patent. I declined. Trevor sank into the chair, the enormity of what he'd missed settling on him like a physical weight. "I made a terrible mistake." "No," Amanda corrected him, leaning forward slightly. "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary or missing a recital. What you did was a choice. You looked at a pregnant woman who loved you and systematically dismantled her self-worth before abandoning her with $700. The precision of her memory made Trevor flinch. "I was different then, young, ambitious." "So was I," Amanda interrupted. 23, pregnant, working 3 jobs while completing online classes. The difference is what we chose to prioritize. Trevor stared at his hands, the gold signet ring that had been passed down through Reynolds' generations suddenly seeming like a symbol of inherited entitlement rather than legacy. "When I saw you both at the plaza," he said quietly, "when I realized what Ethan has become, what you've built, it was like seeing a life I could have had." Amanda's laugh held no humor. "That's where you're wrong, Trevor. You're not seeing what you could have had. You're seeing what you weren't necessary for." The words landed with devastating accuracy. Trevor looked up, meeting her eyes for the first time. "I'd like a chance to know him, not to claim any credit, but just to understand who he is." "That's entirely Ethan's decision," Amanda replied. "He's 14 now, almost the age I was when you left, old enough to make his own choices about relationships." Trevor nodded, grasping at this small concession. "I understand. And, professionally? The Reynolds investments could explore partnerships with Starlight. We have access to capital markets that could accelerate your expansion plans. We could work together, create opportunities for Ethan to eventually inherit both companies." Amanda's expression shifted from neutral to genuinely amused. "You still don't understand, do you? I don't need your contacts or your money. Starlight Entertainment is valued at $22 billion, approximately 5 times what Reynolds Investments is worth. And as for Ethan's inheritance, the algorithm he developed at 14 is already worth more than your entire net worth." Trevor paled as the true disparity in their positions became clear. All these years, he had subconsciously clung to the belief that he had chosen success over family. The reality that he had chosen the lesser success while rejecting what could have been a remarkable family was almost unbearable. "I'll leave my contact information with your assistant," he said finally, rising from the chair. "If Ethan wants to meet me." "He has his own assistant," Amanda replied coolly. "If he wishes to connect, he'll reach out through appropriate channels." As security escorted him through the lobby, Trevor noticed a wall displaying photographs of Starlight Foundation scholarship recipients, women who reminded him of Amanda 15 years ago, determined faces framed by circumstances that would have defeated lesser spirits. He wondered how many of them had been abandoned by men who, like him, had been too blind to recognize their strength. Outside, the afternoon sun felt harsh on his face. His driver opened the car door, but Trevor waved him off. "I'll walk," he said, needing time to process the full weight of what he'd lost. Back in her office, Amanda allowed herself a moment of reflection after Trevor's departure. She had expected to feel something more definitive, vindication perhaps, or closure. Instead, she felt a curious emptiness, as if the confrontation had released a tension she hadn't realized she was carrying. The man who had once held such power over her emotions now seemed diminished, almost pitiable in his belated recognition of what he had thrown away. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "Heading to Aerodynamics Lab. Reynolds came to see you?" "Yes," she typed back. "Nothing urgent. We'll talk tonight." In the weeks that followed, Trevor faced the consequences of his exposed past. Reynolds Investments lost 3 major clients who cited values alignment concerns. His position as CEO came under scrutiny from board members concerned about reputation management. At home, Victoria maintained a frigid distance, spending most of her time at their Southampton estate with Alexander. "The Whitmores disinvited us from their summer gala," she informed him during one of her brief returns to the city. 30 years of family connection, gone because you're now a social liability." Trevor barely registered her complaints. The opinions of New York society that had once seemed so crucial now felt trivial compared to the chance to know his son. On a Wednesday morning in June, Trevor's assistant interrupted a budget meeting. "Sir, there's an Ethan Collins on line 3. He says you're expecting his call." Trevor almost knocked over his chair in his haste to reach his private office. With hands that weren't quite steady, he picked up the phone. "Ethan, thank you for calling." "Mr. Reynolds." Ethan's voice was polite but reserved. "I've given considerable thought to our situation. I believe I would like to meet, not because I need a father figure at this point in my life, but because understanding one's complete biological and social history has empirical value." Trevor smiled despite himself at the formal, analytical approach, a glimpse of how Ethan's remarkable mind operated. "I would like that very much, whenever and wherever you're comfortable." The Starlight Foundation is hosting a small reception for STEM scholarship recipients next Thursday, Ethan said. "It's at 4 o'clock at our headquarters. Would that be acceptable?" "I'll be there," Trevor promised, making a mental note to reschedule the quarterly board review. At Starlight Entertainment, Amanda was reviewing the final details for their expansion into film production when Ethan stopped by her office. He leaned against the doorframe, tall and thoughtful in the afternoon light. "I called him," he said simply. "We're meeting at the STEM scholarship reception." Amanda nodded, studying her son's expression. "Are you sure you're ready?" "I'm not expecting anything," Ethan replied with a maturity that sometimes caught even Amanda by surprise. "I just want to understand who he is. It feels like an incomplete equation otherwise." "I'm proud of you," Amanda said, "not for contacting him, but for approaching this on your own terms." Ethan smiled, the expression lighting his serious features. "I learned that from you. Everything important, I learned from you." That evening, Amanda stood at the window of her office watching the city transition from day to night. The empire she had built surrounded her, not just the physical manifestation of Starlight's headquarters, but the influence her company now wielded throughout entertainment and technology sectors globally. She hadn't built it for revenge. In those early desperate days, survival had been her only goal, keeping Ethan fed, housed, educated. Success had come from necessity, determination, and a refusal to accept the limitations others imposed. Trevor's cruelty had been the catalyst, but her achievements belonged entirely to her own vision and perseverance. The true victory wasn't financial, though the billions she had accumulated provided undeniable security. It wasn't even professional, though her influence had transformed an industry. The real triumph was standing in the living room of their penthouse, headphones on, coding something that would likely change another sector of society for the better. 2 weeks later, Amanda observed from a discreet distance as Ethan and Trevor sat together at the foundation reception, deep in conversation. Trevor was listening intently as Ethan explained something, his hands moving animatedly the way they did when he was discussing a concept that excited him. There was a hunger in Trevor's expression. not for reconnection to power or access to Starlight's success, but simply to know this extraordinary young man who shared his DNA but had been shaped entirely by Amanda's love and guidance. Ethan caught her eye across the room and smiled reassuringly. He would navigate this relationship in his own way, with the emotional intelligence and self-possession that had always been his hallmarks. Amanda turned away, moving to congratulate the STEM scholarship recipients. These young women, brilliant, determined, facing obstacles that would deter most, reminded her of herself at 23. But they would have something she hadn't: support, resources, and a path forward that recognized their potential. The true price of Trevor's rejection hadn't been measured in billions lost or opportunities wasted, but in the relationship he never knew, with a son who had become extraordinary not to prove his worth to an absent father, but because he was raised by a mother who never doubted the value of either of them. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen